Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our advisory council meeting with the students here. It's always great to see faces in person. It's always a great opportunity to see each of you each and every day. Of course, we have a great agenda for today as we get started. We have the next slide, please. As we go through, I hope everyone was able to get through without in your home districts with the flooding that recently happened. As a matter of fact, we still have some districts in Western Kentucky that are still out of school. I talked to the superintendent in McLean County. They're still out, and they don't have a proposed date back. So if you look at flooding that we've had in the past couple of months, whether it be in Eastern Kentucky with Pikeville or in Western Kentucky with numerous districts, it's been a rough time, especially if you look even here in Frankfort. Superintendent Satterley sent some pictures of the flood wall that was just behind Second Street Elementary. So to see what went on in a lot of districts is one that we're very thankful that everyone seems to be doing okay. But there was a loss of life in a student in Franklin County. So before we get started, I'm going to ask this group if we just have a moment of silence, not only for that family, but also too for others that have lost so much, and just a time of just thought and prayerfulness, if you'd like. So let's just take a moment of silence, please, for that family, but also too with others throughout our state. Thank you so much. Well, here shortly we'll do our roll call, but we also have our mindful minute, which has become a staple of what we do here, and I think it's a great opportunity. It allows me some time to reflect. It kind of gets hectic for me, but talking to so many of you that are seniors, I bet your schedule is very hectic too. And as we get close for everyone, we're getting into the AP testing season, we're getting into scholarship season, we're getting into a lot of things going on. So I bet your calendar looks as busy as mine, if not busier, especially with it being seniors. So I always look forward to Dr. Cersei and the Mindful Minute. We also have a presentation we're going to talk to you about with human trafficking. I think this is a good topic for us to have a discussion on with this group for awareness, but also too the future of assessment and accountability. I'm going to go over with you today Framework 3.0. We're going to talk to you a little bit about the town halls. Karen Dodd, who is our Chief Performance Officer, is also here. She's going to talk to you about the town halls. And I'm going to go over with you where we are with the new accountability system. Of course, Preston has seen the last one. I'm going to go over 3.0, but also I'm going to go over with you what the Kentucky Board of Education made in their final motion, if you will, what the accountability system would look like at this point, and would love to get your input as we move forward. So, a packed day today. With that being said, any questions for me before we get started? All right, hearing none, I'll turn it over for a roll call.
Hello. Okay. So if you would please say present or here, just to indicate, Miss Turner, do you have a way to mark it? All right. Thank you. Lisa Abrampaugh,
Here.
Mary Beth Bolin,
Here.
Graham Borden,
Here.
Annie Cockerham O'Donnell, Isabella Edgehill,
Here.
Aniji Fox, Manas Garla,
Here.
Preston Graham,
Here.
Samara Higgins,
Here.
Onette Irakiza, Peter Jefferson,
Here.
Alan Columbia, Sophia Langford, Gabriella McAdams, Tanvi Rakesh.
Here.
I'm Daniel Ratley, present. Luisa Sanchez Amanirez, Abigail Sears,
Here.
Sophia Staples,
Here.
Kwa Ta, Austin Eric Vidotto,
Here.
Alite Jans Medina,
Here.
India Young.
Here.
Do we also get Carly Watts? Ms. Carly Watts? All right, with that being said, if we have our next slide, please. I'll go over a few other announcements. We'd like to take this opportunity. There's a familiar picture there. We won't mention any names right off the bat, but we wanted to congratulate two of our students, Ashley Billiter from DuPont Manual and our chair, Peter Jefferson from Henry Clay High School, representing Kentucky in Washington at the U.S. Senate Youth Program that occurred from March 1st through 8th. And a highlight of the week was the USSYP Annual Senate Reception, where all student delegates have an opportunity to meet and converse with their U.S. senators, which is a great opportunity. And Ashley and Peter met with Kentucky Senators Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul and represented our state very well. The delegates also received a $10,000 scholarship. So congratulations to Ashley and to Peter on their accomplishment. Let's give them a round of applause. I think it's great. Also, too, we do have an announcement coming up. I think one of the best events of the year is coming up at our STLP State Championship. If you've been a part of that, we've talked about that last year. That event occurred right after the boys' state championship, the very next weekend. And there's more people at this event than the boys' basketball state championship, which I do enjoy watching a good basketball game, too. Don't get me wrong. And the boys' championship is a big event. But to think about another event that followed the next weekend and had more students and more people there is amazing. It will be April 23rd at Central Bank at Rupp Arena in Lexington. And then also, too, there'll be, I don't have the exact numbers, but you'd be amazed at what our students are doing inside the classroom. And so many of you have those opportunities, too. So, and I will say, as a former superintendent from Lawrence County, I did have the state champion within our district from Fallsburg Middle School. So very proud of our group there and so many others across the state. Also, too, we do have several graduates from the Kentucky Community Technical College System and the Kentucky Department of Education's Office and Career Technical. We want to congratulate them on the Going Pro Signing Day event that happened at the Capitol Rotunda. The event kicked off Kentucky's Talent Takeoff and Going Pro signing season for high schools and KCTCS colleges. The signing day was also the first event to kick off Community College Month. Each spring, the 16 KCTCS colleges will be hosting events to celebrate the employment success of students that Kentucky employers are filling high-skilled, in-demand job openings. So again, very thankful for that. Are there any questions about that or anything else from the group? We've already done our roll call, and I'll turn it back over to our chair, Peter Jefferson.
All right, everyone. So you all should have received a copy of the minutes from our previous meeting via email. So all we need to do is approve those minutes. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Okay, first motion by Eliate. And can we have a second?
Second.
Second by Sophia Staples. All right, thank you. All those in favor? Please say aye. All those against? Thank you.
And now we have Dr. Michelle Searcy, who will be conducting our Mindful Minute and Wellbeing.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It is so good to see you in person instead of a little bitty box. I get to see all of you, and I'm really excited for that this morning. All right, if we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. All right, we're going to recap our last Mindful Minute. I was not able to be with you all, which I really regretted. I wish I could have been, but Dr. Woods Tucker stepped in for me, and he led you guys through the benefit of journaling, and he also talked to you about how sometimes we can use quotes in books and movies to really inspire us when we do journal. Dr. Tucker, I do want to give you a moment if you would like to say anything to the group.
Grand Rising, everyone. Come on now, you can do better than that.
Good
Grand
morning.
Rising.
Good
There we go.
morning.
There we go. Well, Dr. Searcy, I want to amend your statement. I attempted to walk them through the Mindful Minute. I can never quite get where you're going with these kids here, but I think we had some good progress last month, right? Right? Okay, there you go.
You did an excellent job.
Okay,
Dr.
thank
Tucker.
you.
Excellent
thank you.
job.
Thank you. Thank you. I do want to quickly make mention of a statement that our commissioner mentioned. He talked about the devastating flooding and so forth. And one of the beautiful things about being mindful, we're not only mindful of things surrounding us and ourselves, but also our community. And I know a couple of you have been actively involved, and certainly it's been on your mind about what's happening with your peers across the Commonwealth, particularly here in Franklin County. So I want to thank you for that, because mindfulness, again, is about being keenly aware about what's happening with you, in tune with yourself, but also with your community. And those of you who are contributing towards this relief effort, we want to thank you. I know there are quite a few kids in this area here that I will be talking with in the next couple of days, as well as colleagues here at KDE to help with the recovery efforts. So I want to thank you for that. Dr. Searcy.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. I'm sure you did a wonderful job. I also want to give a thank you to Annie. Annie spoke with a group of our educators about how we can be more inclusive with the deaf and hard of hearing community. She had some wonderful ideas and ways that educators can grow. And I know I learned a lot from her. So if we can give her a round of applause. And in the deaf community, y'all, we just do like this so that they can be a part of it too. Thank you, Annie, for stepping up and being a leader and helping us learn and grow and how we can be more inclusive of our deaf and hard of hearing community. So thank you. All right, next slide. Okay, we are going to do some grounding exercises before we start today because this is our last meeting together. We have done a whole year of a journey with each other, but then also this year has had a lot of complications. So if you can, go on and sit up straight in your seat and put both of your feet firmly on the ground. You can just rest your hands on your lap, and if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. If you don't, please do not feel like you need to. All right, as we're sitting this morning and we're getting ready for our time together, getting ready to start our day, we've had a lot of stress, a lot of things that have happened in our life, in our communities over the last couple of months. A lot of good things too. We've had some exciting times, some accomplishments that we want to also pay tribute to. So before we get started, we're going to take a deep breath in. Filling your lungs completely with air, letting that oxygen travel through your body. We're going to slowly let that breath out. Take another deep breath in. Focusing on what we want to accomplish today. And as we take a deep breath out, any anxiety, fear, that you might have, we're going to release that from our body. And then one more time in. And slowly out. We're also going to do a progressive muscle relaxation, which we learned in the fall. I want you to go on and take your shoulders and scrunch them up high, up towards your ears. Feeling the way that that tension feels in your body. And then we're going to gradually, slowly let that go to remind our body what it feels to be relaxed and at peace with itself. And then lastly, I want you to take your stomach muscles and we're going to tighten those up. The stomach is where we a lot of times feel stress in the ongoing in the very beginning. So then we want to slowly release our stomach muscles. All right, you can open your eyes, shake it all out, kind of roll those shoulders, and we are going to do some year-end reflections as a group today. At the very beginning of the year, each of you were given a journal or pad of paper. I hope you still have that. If you do, you can go on and pull that out. And I want you to think about the goal you set for yourself at the beginning of the year. Just think about it in your own mind. We're not going to share those again. And think about whether or not you were able to achieve that goal on the very first meeting when we were here. And if you didn't achieve your goal, that's okay. Sometimes we have to change our plan to meet our goal, but that doesn't mean we have to change the goal that we originally set for ourselves. So as you think about like whether or not you were successful in meeting your goal, specifically to being a part of this committee, I want you to think about what did you learn about yourself while working towards your goal. And if anyone would like to share, like if doing some deep reflection as we think about this whole year, this whole time that you've spent on the Commissioner Student Advisory, all the presentations that you've heard, all of the opportunities that you have had to be the voice of Kentucky students throughout the Commonwealth, what are some of those things that you learned about yourself? And how has being a part of this advisory committee helped you grow as an individual? Would anyone like to share?
I think that I can speak maybe about this year, but also more broadly about the last, for me, 3 years of experience in the Student Advisory Council. That while we only meet a few times every year, it is still a unique opportunity every time to combine the kind of behind the scene understanding of how decisions are made here, which has greatly kind of amplified my understanding of how we can have an influence as students, but also learning from everybody else across the state, and we have to be geographically, separated until we get here. Then I can learn, about how decision-making processes trickle down to the school levels. And I think over this year and over the last 3 years, I've really had the opportunity to learn how things go from the very top here with the commissioner, all the way down to how each of us experience it in our own schools and how that works in our own communities. It's been really, really impactful.
Thank you for sharing. I love that you are able to see kind of the backdoor workings of how public education works. There's a lot of moving parts, and you guys have been able to learn from that. Oh, yes, thank you. If you do not have your pad of paper, Dr. Tucker is going to walk around and share paper and pencil with you so that you can keep track of that. So thank you, Peter. Yes, those back workings in public education, and we're hoping that you guys can take that into the next stage of your life. Continue to be a voice for students, even after you are no longer students. Your voice is still powerful. I can tell you that quite often when we meet as an agency, when I'm talking to counselors or doing training throughout the state, I often reference what I've learned from each of you in those meetings because it's important for educators to hear that student voice perspective. Anyone else like to share about what you have, how you have grown or how it's impacted you? Yeah.
This council is such an impactful group of people, and the biggest thing I've learned is that we as students are capable of so much, and it's encouraged me as a person to set my sights higher, and not only that, but to really take the next step in advocating for the students at my school and to be a safe place and just really be more ambitious in being mindful and being a good friend and a good student.
Thank you. I love that. And I would say that your generation, the generation that's sitting here, I love your advocacy. You're saying, this is what I believe in, this is what is good, and I am going to take an active stance in working to make changes within our community to make it better. And that type of advocacy is not something I can say that my generation had at your age. So you guys are learning to use your voice, learning to use it in the right way, and making some really good positive change. So if you hear things negatively about your generation, know that there is a lot more that's positive. And sometimes I get frustrated when I hear folks talk about today's generation because what I see is a group of very strong, powerful, brilliant, and very creative outside of the box thinkers with your generation. Thank you for sharing. Time for one more.
If I may make a comment.
I would love for you to.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
The Student Advisory Council allows me to stay grounded. Our number one stakeholders that we serve are the students, first and foremost. And sometimes you get so busy looking at the whatever's happening in different parts of the job, whether it be from finance, whether it be from operations, whether it be from management, whether it be from just so many different moving parts here. The time that I get to spend talking with students, being in classrooms, being with this advisory council, or even having a student on our Kentucky Board of Education, allows me to say, I can stay grounded. And what I mean by that is I was a teacher once, and that relationship between a teacher and student is one of the most powerful relationships that you can find. If you have someone that you have respect for as a mentor, as a professional, but you also get to see the student perspective. And the farther that you move along in administration, that personal contact is harder to maintain. So this advisory council allows me to come back and get grounded again to see what the perspective of students, what that really is. And so again, I look forward to your input. I look forward to the things that you have to say, and it gives me, keeps me grounded and to say, okay, I always believe in my heart of hearts that I'm here to serve students. But unless you stay in contact with students, how can you effectively do that? So that's what one of the favorite things I have about the Student Advisory Council.
Dr. Fletcher, thank you. And I can 100% attest and agree with everything you just said, that the further you get away from the classroom, the harder it is to maintain those relationships. And this group gives us the chance to do that and know that in any organization, whatever your number one priority is, staying connected to that priority and bringing it front and center at the start of every meeting, at the start of every training, is one of the best things we can do in education. So thank you for that. Can we go on to the next slide? All right, so this is where I'm really wanting to pull your all's voice in. And I always go over my time, and I am so sorry. I will try to hurry up. But I do want to look back, and one thing that you can take away from this experience is we've already heard a couple of those. Can I have one more? Maybe from this side of the room. We get this side of the room that would like to share. I know you guys have it within you.
I will say that one really important experience is just asking and realizing that you're not by yourself. Even if you don't get results that you wanted, just asking for advice and for support for the people around you is a really great thing to do. Even if they are a student and you may think that you cannot be mentor or look up to another student, yes, you can always do that. And just something that I got from this experience is how powerful education can be. But education, it's only useful whenever you communicate with people and whenever you really work with others. So just communicate and ask for help if you need to.
I am so glad you were courageous and shared your voice with us, because that is beautiful. Sometimes in life, be it in education or any other part of our life, we can feel very alone, but we're not. We have people that we can ask for help, and we can always lend a hand to someone else that may be struggling too. So thank you for speaking. Okay, and then lastly, this is a big one. So some of you are concluding your time on the Student Advisory Committee, like you're graduating, you're going on to college, and this has been a process for you that has taken shape over several years. And next year, we're going to have a new advisory committee. As much as we hate to say goodbye, we love to see you be successful. So we're going to usher in a new student advisory committee, and we would love to hear if you could give one piece of advice to next year's council members, what would that be? Yes.
So recently I've had to give a lot of speeches just because I am a senior. I'm concluding a lot of my leadership roles. But one thing that a really important person to me said is that every good book must come to an end. However, the beautiful truth behind that is that we have the ability to be the authors of our own stories. So go in, make your impact. Don't be afraid to take your own pen, even if it's hot, pink, and sparkly, and write your own story in your own book. You have the power to do whatever you set your mind to. So that would be just kind of my little lesson from a senior graduating to whoever decides to fill this chair next year.
If your pencil was not hot, pink, and sparkly, I'd be very disappointed.
We love the hot, pink, and sparkly. I love that. And I may even try to pull that in a clip and show at next year's Student Advisory Council in the very beginning. Is there anyone else that has words of advice to next year's council members?
Yeah, it's not going to be hot, pink, and sparkly, but it's something to that. I just feel like if you can get yourself out there and be brave and be confident in yourself and continue and be consistent. I was thinking about being consistent and being confident in yourself. And if you can really focus on those two things, that's key to just being the best person that you can be. And that's really important to me and hopefully everybody else.
And you know, it doesn't all have to be hot, pink, and sparkly. We need that input for lots of different people because we have lots of personalities that are represented. So I love that. Use your voice, be courageous. Know that no matter what your voice, where it's coming from, be confident in that and know that what you have to say is important. Okay, one more and then we're going to close it out.
I would like to say, for those like coming in, to kind of just lean into the space that this is. Take the time to listen and absorb everything that's happening around you. Because I feel like we don't get these conversations had a lot of times outside of this setting, and really just taking in what's happening behind the scenes of our state, and understanding that there are people advocating for you, but also applying that knowledge into how you view a lot of things, and really just taking that perspective and applying that to your everyday life.
I love that. That is the perfect way to end it. That for next year's council members, soak it all in, make the most of the opportunity, and just really draw from all of your fellow council members, but then also all the information that you're getting too. And I also like to say, if you're not a senior and you don't have a student advisory council at your school, you can start one. It's a great thing to have. We want to see this not only at the state level, but also at the district level and the school level too. All right, last slide. Thank you guys for letting me be a part of your journey. This truly is one of the highlights of my years when I get to come and talk to you. I'm an in-person person. Like, I like to make those personal connections, but even if it's virtually, I've loved getting to know you all and getting to be just a little part of your day. Remember, it's not about saving the world. It's about making it better, and you guys are doing that. You're putting those actions into words. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing all that you have become and accomplished.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Searcy. And also, too, for those of you that this may be your last Student Advisory Council meeting, thank you so much for your service. Thank you so much for your input. And thank you for the confidence in being here. You know, I think back about sitting in and it was a few years ago, one or two, maybe more, as a high school senior, I thought about these are the things where I was comfortable. I was comfortable behind a buzzer on an academic team. I was also comfortable on the pitcher's mound, pitching. But I'm not sure if I would have had the confidence to say, you know what, I want to go talk to the Commissioner of Education, because that wasn't my comfort zone. So I'm sure for some of you, this may have been stepping out of your comfort zone. So thank you for that. We appreciate that so much. So again, for those of you that may be moving on, we wish you the absolute best of luck. We're always here for you if you need us. You have my cell phone number. I've given it to all of you. If you need me for anything whatsoever, even if you're a freshman in college, call Dr. Fletcher. Or if you're needing some advice on just your first child, who knows? I don't have a lot of that, but I have 3 of them, and I'm still learning. So, and my baby's a senior this year too. So again, I apologize for referring to an 18-year-old as a baby, but in your mom and dad's eyes, that's where you'll always be, even though we've learned to respect you as adults. So keep that in mind. So best of luck to you. Now, with that being said, thank you again, and we're going to move on to a very serious topic as we move forward, and we're going to welcome Dr. Judy Vanderhaar. She'll be talking to us about human trafficking awareness. So, Dr. Vanderhaar.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Just going to share a little bit of information about something that is very difficult to talk about, but we really need to face it and deal with it. It's part of our reality. So before I get started, I just wanted to share the kind of basic definition of what human trafficking is. So it's a crime that involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to compel a person to provide labor or services or to engage in commercial sex acts. So children can be victims of sex acts for both sex and labor trafficking. I don't know, PowerPoint's going by itself. And child sex trafficking victims can be forced by gang members, family members, or strangers for something of value, such as money, a place to stay, drugs, or transportation. Now, this is a crime that is global. It's the fastest growing crime in the world. It's a reality in all 50 states. And why this is so important for schools is that obviously schools are where there are a lot of eyes on all of our children and where teachers and other adults can notice the warning signs. And I want to share why it's really important. I'm not sure why this is going by itself. Really important for our state is because there are report cards on this topic. And I just want to show you where Kentucky is. So if you can see, Kentucky is, we have a grade of a D overall. And we have a neighboring state, Tennessee, who has the grade of A. Now, one of the reasons that Kentucky's grade is so low has to do with this F here in prevention and training. And one thing that Tennessee does is they require this for all staff and students in their state. So we have a ways to go. We have made gains in some areas around this, around policies, but we definitely have a way to go when it comes to kind of raising awareness about this to promote prevention. And also, I wanted to show you a recent data report by the Legislative Research Commission on human trafficking, and I'm just wanting to show you one slide here. So we're just going to look at, these are child labor and sex trafficking investigations in Kentucky. And these are, again, there's a lot more that goes into this. These are just the number that has been investigated. And we know that reporting of these types of things it's very underreported. But even the reported incidents you see are escalating, right, just in our state alone. And again, this is a global problem. Now, we, in Kentucky, they made a decision in 2017 to require all public schools to post the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And a lot of schools, have done that. But for young people who are involved in this crime, many of them not even understanding that what they're involved in is a crime, the words human trafficking do not mean anything to them. And so we now have posters available that where students can identify are some of these things happening. And as you can see in the poster, we really want to express that it is not your fault and help is available. If these things are happening to you, you can call this number, but underneath it, it also gives a child abuse and neglect hotline, also encouraging them to talk to someone they trust at school. And there is also a number for Take It Down, which is a resource that if young people have images of themselves online, whether they put them up or someone put them up, because the FBI is actually behind this website. They will take a digital fingerprint of the webpage of the image and they will remove it from the internet. So kids can understand that there is help available to. It's not something they have to live with forever, because we know that can result in very negative consequences, including students dying by suicide. And again, I know this is a very heavy topic, but this year, Senate Bill 79 was passed, And that requires schools to educate students and parents about the crime of sextortion, and it also includes a poster requirement. So I am ecstatic that, this is a bipartisan issue and that we are starting to really address the need for education and raising awareness, because, again, it's very complex, right? We know about 40 to 60% of cases of trafficking involve families. And so, again, it's just a very complex issue. Now, we also have a KDE human trafficking webpage that has all the posters. So we have these posters in English and Spanish that depict both a younger person and older students, and those are going to be outside for you where you're going to move to next. So please pick those up and include them in your, bring them back to your school. Again, there's legislation that requires schools to have the hotline, but we think these will be more effective than just having the hotline number up. And thanks to you all, really, there was a couple of you that said that posters do matter to us, and we listened to that, and so that's why the communications office worked on posters for chronic absenteeism. And you'll notice that the poster doesn't depict a scary image, because a lot of times we think about trafficking as, people being in chains and that kind of thing. But again, a lot of perpetrators of the crime do not use those means, right? So more often they're using coercion, or, this could look like something where a young person needs money to help their parent pay their rent, or they need money for food, right, to survive. And so, when older people will take advantage of that. So the other thing we have on this webpage is a resource that's also out there for you. It's just a one-page protocol that basically for adults in schools, a one-page, like, here's something we need to maybe talk about. Here are some signs. And then here are the action steps you take if you suspect this is happening to someone. And it's very important how this gets addressed once there's an indication of this issue, because if schools do their own investigation, number one, that's against the law, but number two, it can really hurt the ability of law enforcement and the social services that get involved to move forward with the case. There's many reasons behind that. So there's this for you also out there.
Dr. Vandehar, if I may add, one of the things about this poster that I think is so important, when each of us reads the bullet points, no one should offer you money, drugs, food, shelter, or gifts for sexual acts or photos or images. And I'm not going to read all of them, but I'm going to point out: threaten, hurt, or bribe you. Make you feel like you can't talk openly to people you trust. To us, I hope, to each one of us in this room, this is so far out of what we can, this is offensive to us. This is something that is hurtful. This is something that we can't imagine. But unfortunately for some, it's their normal. And they don't understand. If you're raised in a certain environment your entire life, or maybe a big part of your life, that's your, quote unquote, your normal. That's your environment. So sometimes we have to educate students that that environment is not normal. As a matter of fact, it's wrong. It's hurtful. So sometimes when we see things like this, as someone that has a supportive family, or that has a great relationship with your high school counselor, or maybe has great relationships with your peers, you don't really understand that this is possible. So even though these seem so offensive to all of us, I hope, unfortunately there's some in our Commonwealth that this may be their day-to-day, and they don't understand this isn't how life is. So that's when you see the thing I like about the picture on the side, it kind of gives you hope. There's something peaceful about what you see on the right. Whereas if you're in harm's way and those bullets on the left, you also have peace, a possibility for of hope there on the right. So unfortunately, in society, in education, it's our job to help students to say, you know, something else is possible. What you're going through is not normal. What you're going through, we want to help fix. But sometimes it takes a realization first to understand that that's not normal. Now, again, these are all very offensive to us. These are things that we can't, in some cases, can't imagine. Or maybe we've seen little bits of this. Maybe somewhere along the way, maybe there's been someone that has tried to control you or schedule your movements or something of that nature, other than your parents that, you know, probably just trying to keep you on a good schedule. But there are extremes. There are extremes where people are actually controlling others for labor, and unfortunately, sex, unfortunately, other things like that. So again, the point of the posters is sometimes that personally that I sometimes see those and I look over is like, you know, we really have to educate students that may be in this situation that it's wrong. This is not normal. There's hope. So and I think that's something that me personally, sometimes we kind of brush over, but we always have to remember that there's students around us. And I think that's why the Mindful Minute is so important, and the point that was made earlier, mindful about ourselves, but also mindful of those around us. Just going to a cafeteria table and sitting by someone that may not have someone sitting with them that day may start a great relationship that's a friendship that'll last forever, or it may be an opportunity for that student to have hope, or it may be an opportunity for that student to say, hey, you know, I can have a friend, or what they're going through is what normal should be. So stepping out and be mindful of your surroundings along this can go a long way too. So I just want to kind of put that out there for you guys to think about and be mindful of as you move forward. Sometimes it's easy for us to look at this, and with everything that we see on TV, we can be numb. We really can. If you think about movies, and I can't watch a scary movie now because compared to what it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it's totally different, but it's about the shock value. So sometimes when we see things, we're so accustomed to it already in movies and things like that, we don't really think about, is that really possible? Is that really happening around us? So I think things like this are very important for us to be mindful of the situation of people around us and how we can reach out and help.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I really appreciate that. Okay, so lastly, just things to consider. And by the way, I want to shout out the communications office for doing amazing graphic designing and working with us on this. So next steps for you all, just consider learning more about this issue. Noticing warning signs of peers or anyone and report it to a trusted adult. Consider requesting that your schools display these posters, and again, you can bring them back with you, right, today, or when you go back. Consider requesting that all adults in your school, have access, know about this. It's on the website, but I've left copies for you out there. And then consider maybe requesting your school explore prevention education for students. So there are a couple of options that are listed here in the PowerPoint. Not a Number is basically 5 sessions, and it's for both male and female students. It's co-ed. You can do that together. And then My Life, My Choice is a little bit more in depth. So there are some things out there. And then these are just some contacts if you have any questions. I'm happy to address them now, or if you want to get in touch to get more involved. So thank you all for your attention. And yes, question?
Sorry, thank you. In the data they showed us, it shows that in 2019 there was a decrease in human traffic. I wonder why is that? Was there any type of training in that time? And if so, it increased later on. Did we stop doing that type of training, or was there any change? And then you also talk about how about posters matter, which I agree. Have there been any any data to back that up, like any correlation with posters and actually having results?
Those are really great questions. You must be a blooming researcher. So the data here, see, it says 2019 that you're referring to dipped. You know, honestly, I don't understand why, and I don't know that there are any kind of, it's hard sometimes to, first of all, there have been no posters other than the National Human Trafficking Hotline in some schools. And this year they just passed, or last year actually, they passed that businesses now, restaurants, hotels, rest areas in Kentucky also have to have posters. But as far as reporting, I mean, you know, it could be a variety of factors, but as far as related to school, there would be no, you know, I mean, we had the issue of COVID, so there were less eyes on students at some point, and was it the end of 2019 when school shut down? So we also saw that I analyzed data on missing children. So we had over 3,000 missing kids that actually were reported missing. And looking at that trend data, we saw a dip around the time kids were not at school. So therefore, there's nobody reporting them missing. So it could be that, but it's really hard to tell. And again, this is a fraction of the incidents actually happening, right? This is only things that have been reported. So it's a fraction. But you can see the general trend, and that's what I think is most important, is that it is, even those reporting is escalating. And I actually believe once these posters are visible to students, we may see more. Because like your question about are posters effective, there is some research about that, you know, obviously posters are not enough, but they can be effective in getting that initial call for help, but they are definitely not enough. They're definitely not enough. We need to start this education early, which is why, again, Senate Bill 79 being passed is a huge win, because that will be more preventative than kind of we're dealing with the after the fact.
I think also to add to that, we've seen more movies about human trafficking, so the awareness. So notice this is the investigations per reporting. So if you look at the number of investigations, yes, they're increasing, but that may be because people are more aware of their surroundings. There's two factors there, at least two, several. One, it's a possibility that human trafficking is increasing, but it's also a possibility that we're becoming more aware and people are reporting it because they recognize it. So again, I haven't read through this report, but there could be two factors there. This could be something like, hey, with the more attention that's brought to it, then there's more investigations that are occurring because of the attention that's being brought to it. So there's another way to look at that.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would say that's a great point about there is an increase generally in awareness, although I will say some of the films depict those more extreme cases, and a lot of times it's those quiet cases that, as Commissioner described earlier, but this is part of the work, so. Did you have another?
Oh, I was just going to add how social media could be. Oh, sorry. I was just going to add how social media could be actually harming the victims, and how could that also be a factor that is increasing the human traffic, and if there have been any project or action taken to kind of like see how can social media be also used to help them instead of also harming them.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to look at the organization Love 146, because they talk about very low-hanging fruit that we can do for young people around social media. Just simple things like change your privacy settings. Like, that's not something social media companies tell anyone, especially young people. So something very simple like that. So there's definitely an impact on social media, both negatively and also can be used in a positive way, like with any issue. But I would check out Love 146. They have some very compelling, engaging content that you can learn a lot from, and use it to teach other people too. Those are great questions. Thanks.
I was wondering, are any of those resources targeted at labor trafficking? Because a lot of what I see is not only abuse of the students in a romantic or sexual nature, but a lot of my friends I see they are being exploited at work, that they work unreasonable hours and they won't report it because they deem the money is more important than their well-being. And I was just wondering if there are any resources dedicated to trying to help them out of that situation.
That's a great question, because we should never just talk about sex trafficking without talking about labor trafficking. There is a little overlap, but 100%. I really appreciate your question. So one thing that, again, I actually recently got a question from a school district about the new requirements for employers, and it includes requirements around kids of a certain age. And so that is something also that should be out there in schools, posted for young people to be aware of. But you're bringing up a really good point. There's, there are the rules, and then there's the reality, right, where they're scared. So the posters here do address in one way about forcing, work or labor trafficking. But again, it's more like the issue of forcing or coercion. So trafficking is not just force, it's coercion, it's fraud, it's, the curriculum by Love 146 called Not a Number is both labor and sex trafficking, and the My Body, My Choice is just sex trafficking. But I'm very glad you brought that up. And especially in Kentucky, we have a lot of labor trafficking. We just held the first United States National Labor Trafficking Conference was held in Louisville by one of the organizers, who are now going out and training adults in all the regions on Human Trafficking 101. And she's very much the import of addressing both types. So yeah, it should be reported. And then I know, again, if they're trying to put food on their family's table, this is very messy. Very complicated, and we got to just do the best we can to make it better. So
I think it goes back to what was mentioned earlier. Sometimes students have to step forward. And this is not normal. This is not what's accepted, but it's difficult sometimes. Maybe a family needs the money. And it's hard a student should not be working 70 hours a week and also going to school the next day, each and every day. So what's that look like? It's hard to tell. But I think a lot of times it's more about educating our students what's normal and what's not normal, and then also trying to give them resources on what you can do next, regardless of the situation. But it's a great point about labor.
Yeah, and then knowing what the rules actually are, like getting that poster. You can look at the latest labor employment poster, and I can send that to you. I think we've talked before, and if you want to email me, and I'll send that to you. But knowing what the laws are really important.
I have a question about the posters.
Yeah.
I know personally, if I was at school, taking the time to stop and read that and take down the phone number might be uncomfortable for someone when other people are around. Are there digital ones that can be posted? I know a lot of schools use online formats for updates, submitting assignments and whatnot. So are there digital resources we can access in order for schools to post it online? That way people could read it by themselves and take it in.
That's a great suggestion. So right now it is on our webpage. So there is a digital version of the poster. Are you recommending a QR code or
I mean, that could work, or honestly, even just a PDF that could be
Yeah, we have them
uploaded.
in PDFs. Yeah,
Okay.
they're in. If you go to the KDE Human Trafficking page, all of that information is there. So let's see. And there's actually also on the webpage, there are links to other kind of resources about what schools can do that go very much more in depth than what I'm sharing with you now. This is just, again, I call the cliched low-hanging fruit of what we can do. So these are the English and Spanish versions of the posters and their PDFs. Again, thanks to our communications office. This is the one-page protocol for school. And then these are, again, some kind of instructions about reporting. And then addressing trafficking in America's schools. So that is still up. Unfortunately, some resources at the federal level have been removed for certain things that I think we're aware of. But there are other kind of resources here that you can look at. And just to know that bus drivers are required to have awareness training. So, and I think that's a great step. But, you know, we want to get to where Tennessee is, right? We want to get from our state D to an A. And I think we can do that.
I think you bring up a good point, too. We could always go back and advocate with our schools. Do you have this on our website, or do you have this in our messaging? Do you have this, not only do you have it in a poster form at a school, but are there ways that we can, as a school, maybe even, we are a part of messaging systems that we get from our local high schools and things of that nature. Can we send this out maybe once a year, or can we have this just readily available on our website as students can click on and go from there too? So I think those are things that we can go back as a student and say, do we have this at our school, not only as the poster, but also in that digital form? So I think that's a great point.
I think also too, a part of reaching students who are also in the situation is meeting them where they're at. I feel like in the cases I have seen, like personally, they are cut off socially, given that they are being trafficked, and that the people putting them through this don't want them to have readily available communication. So I feel like too, if they are going to contact someone, I feel like schools should be able to have that readily available, because chances are they're not going to have that communication line personally. So I feel like if anything, if there's like a form or if there's a way they can discreetly contact that hotline within the safety of a school building, that would also be really helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point. And hopefully, you know, if, you know, someone can, the human trafficking hotline is very, I'd say it's very victim friendly, and they're all about providing resources, and they understand the importance of anonymity. But again, hopefully as schools become more educated about the growing reality of this issue, we'll do more and put more things in place. I mean, one thing is here to talk to a trusted adult at your school, but, you know, I always like to point out to everyone, if you don't know your own data, when I talk to adults in the schools, but it may be interesting for you all, on the Kentucky School Report Card, there is a quality of school climate and safety survey. On that survey, you will find the % of students who disagree that I have an adult at school that I can talk to when I have a problem. And I like to extrapolate that to the actual number that represents. So if it says 10% of kids disagree, well, that could be, you know, that could be 200 kids. That could be 500 kids, depending on the size of the school. So, sorry, I'm using the word kids, but students, young adults, or children. But I really recommend that you look at that survey for your school and your district, and also promote that, because it's, again, looking at when there's a climate of safety and warmth and trust, that helps everyone, whether it's an issue of trafficking or, you know, sextortion or child abuse or bullying. You know, people are more likely to help each other, and peers report it for other peers and that kind of thing. So I always recommend to kind of take a look at that survey and encourage staff to actually use it to see where can we grow.
Another question, if that's
Yeah.
okay. I know you mentioned there's a lot of laws protecting these individuals, but in the case of someone's employed and they're overworking or they're not getting the required breaks that they deserve for their age, are there laws that will protect them when standing up to it and not losing their job? Because I know the main fear is if I say something, I'm no longer employed, now I'm not getting money. Is there ways to protect themselves that they can stand up in a way that will still secure their job while also getting them the fair treatment?
That's an excellent question. And that's why it's so nerve-wracking, right? Because you don't have the power in the situation. But if you know the law and you have, for example, I'm pretty sure every community has legal aid. So if you can't afford an attorney, like getting somebody who understands the law and will fight with you on your behalf, I think can definitely help protect. But again, I should have said at the beginning, I'm not an expert by any means in this topic. It's something that I think I've always felt like we needed to do more. So I'm not an expert. That's why I really encourage you all to if you feel passionate about this, or have experiences that you continue to learn on your own, like learn for yourself, and because we need this advocacy, I would say, to spread. And you guys are definitely amazing advocates. So thanks for the question.
I think the big issue there would be, do you have access? Do you have access? Who can I contact? So if a student finds themselves in this type of situation, what next step are you willing to take? So I think that's where you have to find other resources, whether it be talking to someone at school. Say, okay, what do I have available to me? Can you connect me with someone? Because, your guidance counselor is probably not going to have a lot of information on that, but on the other hand, they should be able to connect you with someone that can. And so whether it be, this is a situation, is this a pattern? Is this something happened once? Or is this something that's happened for over a year and there's no relief in sight? So I think it's about reaching out to the proper people, first of all, to get that information and having access. So I would recommend that you start off is, if this is a situation that you feel it needs to be remedied, start off by talking with someone at school and then say, okay, who can you point me to next? All right. Thank you, Dr. Van Haar. We really appreciate the presentation. Very heavy subject, but again, a very important one. And again, as we move forward, great questions. Then again, how do we connect people? How do we make sure that we're having those resources? How do we become mindful of our surroundings? How do we also point out things that we need to report? So those are all great questions as we move forward. So with that being said, we are going to move into our next phase. I'm going to ask everyone to stand up first and stretch a little bit before we get into the next part, because the commissioner is going to be presenting, and I don't want anyone falling asleep. Okay, so I just want to make sure you have some blood flowing, a good stretch. That's actually for the commissioner as much as anything else, because I tend to get stiff after a little period of time. Thank you so much. And in our next section, Karen Dodd and I will be talking about the future of assessment and accountability with our Framework 3.0. And what you also see is we're going to talk more about town halls and what happened in our town halls as we went forward, but also, too, the difference in the 3.0 and what was approved at the board to move forward in advocacy, and then what are our next steps. Then also, too, I want you to be mindful as we go through some questions. We're going to talk about this concept of local accountability with districts. So I'd like for you to kind of focus in on that and what your thoughts are on local accountability. So I'm going to prompt you a little bit about a question maybe a little bit later. What are your thoughts on local accountability? And we'll try to define that for you. And then also, too, think about some things that may be already occurring in your districts that align with this accountability model. So those are two questions I want you to think about as we move forward. So we've got probably a good 20, 25, maybe 30 minutes of some presentation here, and then we'll open it up some questions, but also some questions for you. So I'll turn it over to our Chief Performance Officer, Karen Dodd.
Good morning, everyone. You can go to the next slide. So we had our town halls, which you may have heard about, in January and February of this year. And we have 9 regions in Kentucky. Actually, we have 8 regions in Kentucky. And we worked with our co-ops. So those are areas where the superintendents of the schools come together regionally and are able to do things on behalf of their districts.
So if you're out in Western Kentucky, Mayfield, in that area, you're probably your district's probably a part of WKEC, which is Western Kentucky Educational Co-op. Eastern Kentucky has KEDC, KVEC. You also have GREC, Southeast South Central, NKCES, OVEC,
Correct?
and GREC. I said GREC. I think I named all 8. I believe I did. If I didn't, if I missed anyone, I will hear from a co-op director pretty soon, I'm pretty sure. But again, these groups, essentially you have districts are a part, and they can be part of multiple co-ops where they come together for professional development, for training, but also too when we have different opportunities like, Central Kentucky, CKEC. I saw Woodford County and I thought CKEC. So David, I did mention CKEC. With that being said, where they come together for training, but also how do they collaborate and work together. So it gives us an opportunity to work with these groups to do things like town halls and to get information out.
Yeah, and so they were really wonderful to work with and help us to put these town halls together and really help us draw folks in to listen to what we are doing to, I'd say, improve accountability in the state of Kentucky when it comes to student performance. We heard a lot a couple years ago when we started this effort that students want to be seen as more than a number on one test, right? So when you think of ACT or your K-Prep, now it's Kentucky Academic Academic Standards, KAS.
KSA, Kentucky Summative Assessment.
Thank you, sorry. It was K-Prep when my kids were in school.
It was Curious when I was in school.
So anyway, so that was why we put these town halls on. We wanted to see what is it that the community members really want from their schools. As business leaders, what do you expect a student or a person coming either out of high school or out of college to be able to do in order to give those folks a job? And we know that college isn't for everyone. So what should you all be learning in order to go into the workforce? So those were the kinds of questions that we kind of went into these town halls with. So as I was saying, there are 8 co-ops. We went to all 8 and an additional one in GREC, which was Bowling Green, Kentucky, where we had one just for the Spanish-speaking community. We had over 600 individuals who came and attended among all of those 9. So that was really a good turnout for us. We were very happy with that. And you can see on this slide the statistics of the stakeholders that attended. So for the most part, we had educators there, which is our primary stakeholder group. They're the ones who are going to be heavily affected by this, as well as students. We have students in that 14%, so we didn't have a ton of students, which is one of the reasons why we're talking to you today, because we still want to hear your voice. And then you can see also community members, business leaders. We did have some legislators there. We have one legislator who is part of the Kentucky United We Learn Council, which we've talked to you all a lot about the Kentucky United We Learn Council. They are the ones behind putting together this new model for accountability. And so one of our legislators is on there, and we had quite a few legislators actually show up to these town halls. So it was really good that they are listening as well to what the community members are saying, so that what is required in schools can be changed as needed. You can go to the next slide. So some of the common topics that came up, assessments, obviously. So just as I said, ACT and the KSA, what is it that students, parents, educators, what are you looking for? What should that look like as we move forward? If we're not going to be relying solely on tests, what should we be talking about? And you guys have probably heard a lot about, hopefully, vibrant learning experiences. And that's really where we're going with assessment and accountability, which Dr. Fletcher is going to talk a lot more about. But it's those vibrant learning experiences that we had other districts come in and talk about what those vibrant learning experiences are looking like in their districts. And that was really the highlight of these town halls, is hearing what is happening already, even before anything is being required. Social studies and science, things are changing around there. Dr. Fletcher is going to talk more about that. Student growth, so looking more at how a student is progressing from year to year, again, instead of just looking at a single test. Equity concerns, some of the things that we heard were questions around how, if we go into this local accountability, which means it's more about what that community wants or what that school is looking for out of their students. How will it be equitable from one district or one school to another? How will, and that's a question that was asked to Dr. Fletcher a lot. How are you going to ensure that if I'm doing something really innovative, that another district is doing differently? How are you going to compare those? And so Dr. Fletcher is going to talk a little bit more about that when we get into the local accountability side of things. Inclusion and special education, a lot of educators and parents that showed up to hear about how this new system would account for those special needs students. And then the federal requirements and implementation timeline. This is going to take time. So we are really just at the beginning. Even once we have what we consider a good model to put forth, there are a lot of things that need to happen, a lot of training in schools, laws that need to be changed or tweaked in order to move forward. We're kind of looking at what's happening with the federal government right now, what's going to need to go through there, what's going to need to go through our local government. So those are all the kinds of questions that came up and that we tried to address in those town halls. You can go to the next slide. So these are just some of the themes, again, that we collected either from folks that were asking questions during the town halls. They also had an opportunity to write them down, or we had a QR code where they could go in and ask questions afterwards. So some of the themes focus on local flexibility, developing and showcase programs that are important to their communities, such as the arts program. So that was something that you may not see in the slides that we're going to share with you in that local accountability piece. So again, this is where folks came out and said, what about arts? What about science? So this local flexibility came up a lot, a big theme. But they also really liked, because this is under the WOW, that they do get that flexibility to choose. If arts is important to us in our community, we can put that into our local accountability system, and we'll get some kind of credit for that. They liked the fact that there was an emphasis on preparing students for a prosperous Kentucky. This is something that we heard from some of the business folks who showed up into the town halls. I'm tripping over my words. Sorry about that. So really focusing, again, like I was saying in the very beginning, what does a business person need? What are they looking for from you all upon graduation? And then support for diverse learning needs. Again, if that special needs is maybe you have a larger population of special needs students in your school, that is certainly something that school could decide or that district could decide to work on moving forward and put that in their own accountability model. Next slide. And then the wonders. So these are things that people were still had questions about that maybe they felt didn't get answered during the town halls, or things that came up afterwards that they were still thinking about. So as I said, equity, consistency, that was one of the big ones that came up. Implementation and practicality. So how are we going to do this? This sounds really great, but how is this going to work? And so really asking for some guardrails or some guidelines as the implementation begins. So those are things that we're currently still working on here at the department as we move forward. And then support for teachers and leaders, kind of the same things there. What will we need to put into place so that this can be implemented? You can go to the next slide. And so Dr. Fletcher will take it from there with what that framework is looking like right now.
Thank you, Ms. Dodd. I appreciate that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you what 3.0 looks like, what it looked like, and then also, too, I'll talk. There's only a couple minor tweaks that happened at our Kentucky Board of Education meeting, but I'm going to go through the model framework 3.0 and then give you an opportunity to ask questions and talk a little bit about what are the changes, what are the similarities, and what we're doing now in classrooms, but also what are the differences. So next slide, please. And I'm not going to go on over the differences of 2.0 and 3.0 because that's already been made and we're moving forward. We're already on now what's probably is going to be 3.1. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 3.0 and what the next version will look like. So next slide. When you're thinking about our testing system, our accountability system now, there is so much that's relied upon standardized tests. There's so much that, you know, your instruction, especially in middle school and elementary school, is really around this is what is on the test, or for so many districts. Some of your districts have stepped out of that mold a little bit, but it's always about standardization. What do we want to move towards is about vibrant learning. And then the best phrases that I can use to say what's vibrant learning, it's what's going on in the classroom that's relevant to you? What's meaningful to you? What matters to you as a student? What's going to prepare you for that next step? What's going to make sure that, you know what, I stayed up till about 2 o'clock last night, but still yet I want to get up at 6 a.m. and I want to be in class at 8 a.m. Some of you maybe 9 a.m. But with that being said, what are those relevant teaching and learning moments that are going on in the classroom that's meaningful to you? More than just a standardized test. And then also, too, how do we come up with allowing students some agency to develop their own ways of demonstrating learning? But also, too, state tests, they don't always meet you where you are. It's more about this is the standard, this is what's going on, this is what we want to know about. So how can you demonstrate the impact that your education has had upon you? So we want to look at that vibrant learning, going from standardization, which we have to have some of that. There are federal requirements that require some of that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Also, too, opening up to give you that, what exactly does it look like to have a meaningful experience, a useful experience, a relevant experience? Then how do you demonstrate your learning based on that? Also, systems in the past, it's more about comparison. You know, were you a red school? Were you an orange school? Were you a yellow? Were you a blue or green school? You see so many districts across our state, when the state testing comes out, you start seeing colors. It's what color were you? It's also, too, it's about comparison. Unfortunately, we still have, you know, there's some districts and schools that need help, and we want to help them. But also, too, there's a lot of, how do I avoid being in that bottom 5% so the State Department doesn't come in? So there's some comparison there that's going on now. But how do we move from that comparison and people competing against each other to get a certain test score? When I say people, I'm talking about districts, to how do we work together to make sure all students across the Commonwealth have a vibrant learning experience throughout their high school career? How do we share ideas? How do we make sure that every single student has that opportunity? And we want districts to collaborate with each other, to lift each other up. And I've said this in several meetings. One of my favorite slides, we had different districts that were giving out, talking about their local accountability model, their profiles of a learner, and things of that nature in our presentations. And one was from Woodford County. Other than the pictures of students and the work that we're doing, my favorite slide had Woodford County's emblem on the paper, on the slide, and then it had all the districts that they were working with. They were working with Logan County, Rowan County, Johnson County, Shelby County. Maybe even Kenton County might have been on there too, but also remember Clark County. If you start putting pins on a map, that's all across Kentucky. They were collaborating with so many districts all the way to the western part of the Kentucky to the far eastern part of the Kentucky to make sure that their local accountability model made sense and they could get ideas from others. Imagine what that looks like for all districts if we're working together to lift each other up. It's about collaboration, not so much about comparison anymore, but more about how do we collaborate with each other? How does that change the student experience? Essentially, we want to set up networks. If you have districts that are very similar in population, maybe geography, maybe socioeconomic status, how can we, and they have maybe the same types of resources, it may be one that's in Eastern Kentucky that needs to be connected with one in Western Kentucky to work together to say, how do we make sure students have these vibrant learning experiences? And if you want to think about examples, when I think about, there's a list of different things that can fall into vibrant learning. For example, job shadowing, internships, defenses of learning, capstone projects, project-based learning. So when you think of vibrant learning, if you want an example, those are some of the examples I lean back into. So again, how do we get past these color ratings of this is a color that a district is versus, you know what, we've lifted up and we've made a better experience for every single student. Zip code doesn't matter. We've lifted each other up. The next thing, a lot of times too, you see a lot of things about state control. We decide, when I say we, typically the people across the river at the Capitol will decide we'll take suggestions across, and then at the end of the day, the state overall says these are the measures of accountability. But you know what? We're not the same districts. What you may find in Fayette County is not the same thing you're going to find in Kenton County or Whitley County or Mayfield or Danville or Hazard. We're not the same people. So there are certain things that maybe our community values that we really need to lean into and make that part of our accountability system. For example, so many districts across our state have such an emphasis on the arts and being part of a drama production. How can that be a part of our accountability model? Or music. There's so many pockets of wonderful music and musicians across the state. As a matter of fact, anybody watch American Idol much? Noah Thompson came from Lawrence County. He won the American Idol a few years ago. As a matter of fact, the concert that happened on TV was just right outside my office on the football field. That's one of many. Look out in Western Kentucky, the bluegrass roots that we have in Western Kentucky, and just country music and any music, that genre that you want to come up with. There's so much that districts can focus on other than how did you do on the math test? Because there's some things that are just as important as mathematics. As a former math teacher, it hurts to say that. But there are some things that are just as important, and it depends on what's in the local accountability. So how do we give districts that local innovation and say, you know what, this is what's important to our community. This is what's important to our students. And this is what we want to make a part of our accountability system. Right now, you don't have local choice. Your assessment, your accountability is based on how many people are, what percentage of your students are transition ready, your graduation rate, your score on a math test, your score on a reading test, a social studies test, a science test, all that's rolled into a percentage, then that's who you are. I think we're so much more than that. You know, what that looks like for someone in Lawrence County is going to look totally different for what something may look like in DuPont Manual. So, with that being said, how do we give that local autonomy, that local innovation to allow districts to say, okay, this is how we want to be assessed. We're going to make sure that we abide by federal requirements, but also, too, give us some of that local innovation, that opportunity to do something different, to do something that reflects who we are. And then at the end, there's a certain part that has to be about compliance, but that was the major priority in our system now. How do we comply with federal, state law? How do we make sure that all of our efforts are wrapped around improving math and reading scores? Back to, we want to make sure that districts have the opportunity to work with each other in those networks to give feedback. How can we improve as it relates to maybe what our accountability system looks like? Then also, too, there's so many districts across our state that are coming up with different dashboards, if you will, on local accountability. You know, I'm a good friend of mine. I have so many good friends that are superintendents. I'll mention one in particular. And to give you an example of this, Tracy Moracy is a superintendent at Greenup County, northeastern Kentucky. And she wouldn't mind me sharing. She shared this at different times too. In 2008, 2009, Greenup County High School was designated as a persistently low achieving school. Some of the bottom test scores in the state. And I think I have the number down. And she said their poverty rate for their community was around 64%. So, after being labeled as a PLA school, they did all these efforts to improve test scores, to do interventions based on test scores. 10 years later, they are a high-achieving high school. They've met their test score results, and they've exceeded their test score expectations, but yet the poverty rate is still 64%. So meeting a test score made no difference in the poverty rate within their community. That's a different accountability. How do we make a change when it comes to the poverty rate in our community as a school? And to have a district that has the backbone, if you will, to say that's one of the things we're going to hold ourselves accountable to is huge. That's local accountability. That's a huge picture. But also, too, having that feedback and support so that you can share things like that. So if you look at on the my left side, standardized comparison, state control compliance, and moving more towards vibrant learning, collaboration, local innovation, feedback and support is where we want to move towards. Okay? Next slide, please. Okay, if you were to get a picture of essentially what our new accountability model looks like, there's two pieces that's put together here. There are still federal accountability indicators that are part of federal law. Now, the change that our board asked was that we change this due to the volatility that we're seeing in the federal government right now, to change that from federal accountability to state accountability with federal requirements. Yes, it is semantics, but it makes a little bit of a sense that this is our state accountability part that still relies on what's required at the federal level. Again, this hasn't changed as far as we know. We have requirements as it relates to summative performance in reading and mathematics. That reading and math test that you take at the end of the year in 3 through 8, and I think also as you go into high school, that 3 through 10, those summative assessments in reading and math are part of our new accountability model, and it's part of the old one too. The second part, this is a change. Before, districts were using change versus growth. And let me tell you the difference. With change, you're basically saying, how did this year's third graders do versus last year's third graders? Do we have a higher percentage of proficient? Do we have a lower percentage of proficient? So it's about change. So if you want to define change at its core, it's like, how did the third, fourth, and fifth graders this year do against last year's third, fourth, fifth graders? Was there a positive change or a negative change? What we're hearing from so many districts is we want to look at individual student growth. Where did you get the student, and where did you take the student? That's really growth. That's really what we want to be a part of. And again, moving from that, comparing a large group of third, fourth, and fifth graders this year to last year's third, fourth, and fifth graders, to where did you get the student, and where did you take the student? Did they improve? When they say did their maybe their grade level equivalency improved when it comes to math and reading? But also, too, still part of our accountability model that's the same as the transition readiness and graduation rate. That's part of federal requirements, but we've had so much investment across our Commonwealth on, did you get an industry certification? Did you get dual credit classes? Did you pass dual credit classes, I should say, probably? Did you get a C or better in a dual credit class? In other words, are you ready for what's on the next level? And there's a long list of that transition readiness. We're not moving away from that because we feel like that's still important. Because if you get dual credit classes, or if you pass an AP test or something of that nature, that demonstrates that you're ready for what's next. There's also requirements under English language learners and what progress they make. There's a slight change in that on how they're onboarding. Also still including the climate and safety survey. And one of the things that we heard so much was we wanted to still have student voice in our accountability model, and that's where the climate and safety survey came in. Now, the difference in this is the science assessment. By law, we are required to give a standardized science assessment to all students in grade band levels, one in elementary, one test in middle school, and one in high school. And then do comparisons, not comparisons, but also to display that data. But it doesn't have to be a part of the federal accountability model. So one of the things that we thought that by pulling out that science assessment, it's going to give us a better opportunity to look at, instead of just a science test, maybe there's opportunity for some competency-based education or competency-based assessments that are maybe performance-based assessments that are based on competencies, if you will, and then actually report science separately. Now, that is the part that's lines with what's required federally. But the most important piece, in my opinion, is that local accountability. Yes, we're looking at interim assessments as it relates to reading and math, and this is the other change, is having interim assessments at grade band levels for reading and for writing and social studies. That's at the bottom. Still having those, but allow those to be developed locally by districts. So what exactly does your social studies accountability, if you will, look like at district level, or your writing? Instead of just taking the grammar test of some sort, maybe it's more about a writing piece or a communication piece. So how does your district want to assess your writing as opposed to just a statewide test? Same thing with social studies. Instead of looking at a social studies test, I think it's at 5th grade, 8th grade, that we're giving those social studies tests, allowing districts to develop their own. Is it revolving around civics? Is it revolving around, well, it also has to revolve around the academic standards, but allowing districts to develop their own. And how do you report that locally? At the top, we still have locally determined indicators. And I'll give you some examples of this. There are some districts in our state that are looking at the percentage of students that are involved in co-curricular, extracurricular activities as a accountability measure. So not just a math test, it's more about how many of our students are involved in maybe the swim team, maybe the basketball team, maybe the academic team, maybe band, maybe JRTC, maybe drama, a drama production. Because if you look at research, some of the best indicators of student success once they leave our four walls of our buildings is, are they involved outside of the classroom? So there are some districts that have identified that as an accountability measure, and their community wants to hear what percentage of our students are involved in something more than just what's happening in the classroom. I think that's different. It's not a math test. I keep going back to math. I shouldn't do that as a math teacher, as a former math teacher. But again, having districts to have those locally determined indicators, whether it goes back to your defenses of learning, and some of you in this room may have done defenses of learning as you've gone through. What does that look like as a part of your accountability and the competencies that you're seeing within your own district based on those profiles of a learner? I think we have we're approaching 150, somewhere between 140 and 150 districts that have profiles of a learner, where they identify competencies around possibly communication, collaboration, critical thinking, maybe even collaboration, community, effective thinking. There's others that are throughout the state that different districts have. But there are so many different parts of those competencies that districts can have in their profile of a learner. What do defenses of learning look like? For example, we have students that are doing defenses of learning in front of community members that have a rubric, but when they get finished with their defense of learning, they're getting offered jobs. This is what I've done in my experience here at this high school. And this is how it's prepared me for what's next. And then you're seeing employers to say, you know what, do you need a summer job? Or maybe even after you're finished with college, we have a job waiting on you. Also, too, we see a lot of districts that are giving students that may speak a different language, that have a different culture than what maybe they're used to actually give their defense of learning to others that speak the same language, and they're able to celebrate their own culture and who they are. I think that's huge. You don't see that. I'm going to use on a reading test. How about that? I'll take away math on a reading test. You don't see that on a social studies test per se. You don't see that on a science test. How can we celebrate who we are, but also be held accountable to how our district is allowing those opportunities to say, this is what we're doing? So again, when you look at those locally determined indicators, that's up to the district. Talk to your parents, talk to your students, talk to your business leaders and say, what do we value and how do we turn that into an accountability model, whether it be involvement in co-curricular, extracurricular, whether it be maybe even poverty rate, or maybe it's the success on defenses of learning. What percentage of students are getting are involved in internships, or maybe job shadowing? All that could be a part of what is state accountability. And that really takes that, a lot of times when you say state testing or state accountability, there's a bad taste in your mouth when you're finished. Because you see the stress that's on students, you see the stress that's on teachers, but how does that change when you have something that's based on vibrant learning experiences that's going on in the classroom each and every day? That's different. Now, there's also some other changes I'll talk a little bit about. For example, interim assessments. I think if we go around the room and polled everyone is either taking MAP, iReady, STAR, or something that on 3 times a year. So what we were looking at the state level is possibly having their own interim assessment that aligns with the state model. So instead of taking that third testing window of MAP, STAR, iReady, then you just take the state interim assessments and the state assessment at the end that's aligned all together. So really, you have an opportunity if a district wants to opt into our interim assessment system, that they could actually get rid of one testing window, if you will. So again, trying to, On the right side, what we're trying to do is get down to the requirements to streamline down to what's required federally. Then on the left side, to give flexibility for districts to say, what do we want to implement? How do we want to handle this? So, and then how do you put those two type of systems together? While we also still have the requirement of identifying those CSI schools, those schools that need intensive support that fall in the bottom 5%, and we need to say, how do we help those schools? How do we help those districts? How do we provide those resources? But also, too, giving the districts the opportunity to say, this is who we are, more than just a test score, and this is what it looks like. And this is how we want to be accountable to our local districts. So next slide, please. The other thing that we realize is this just doesn't flip a switch and it happens overnight. So as we get ready, and we'll talk a little bit about the advocacy phase here in just a second, let's say that our state government approves this accountability system. So what we look at in the fall of 1996, there are districts that we call L3 districts, local laboratories of learning, that have been engaged in this work. And some districts that are not even part of the L3 that's been engaged in this type of work too. So do they have a local accountability model that's ready to go? And are they ready to be a part of that pilot phase? Then after we build that pilot phase, then look for more districts to move into the expansion phase. Then eventually what we want is to have every district to have a local accountability model that's a part of their overall accountability model, and it's sustainable. With the final goal being is, how do we impact the student experience? I hope when you look through this accountability model, it's more than just saying, we don't want your elementary, middle school, and high school years to be revolving around a test. We want it to be something that's relevant, something that's going to get you on the right path, something that's going to help you with whatever the next step shall be for you. And so that the whole point of that local accountability model is to give the flexibility with local districts. For example, you may have some districts that are in the agriculture is a big part of what they are. How do they build their accountability model or include agriculture to be a large part of that? Or you may have manufacturing. Or you may have one district, I think there's one district that talks about the percentage of students that pass the AP test. That might be something that's important for that community. You have other districts that even include dashboards that talk about what percentage of their teachers have a master's degree or better. That's not really student accountability, but it is a level of accountability that we look at for districts. So if you look at what's next, if it's approved in January, February, March, April of 1996, which is going to be here before you know it, then how do we implement that? It doesn't just happen and every district has to be there next fall. We have to make sure that we build capacity and then also have that opportunity for it to expand and then sustain. Next slide, please. And this kind of brings us back to the journey. If you look at what we've done with our Kentucky United We Learn, the Kentucky United We Learn Council has really steered this work, if you will. They've taken input from so many different groups. And as a matter of fact, Daniel, I think you were part of the Cool Council. If I'm correct, was there anybody else that maybe I missed? Okay, I know Daniel. I saw Daniel last summer and we talked a lot. That's the first time I met Daniel, as a matter of fact, was at the Cool Council meeting last summer. And what we went through was like 4 prototypes. This is what our first prototype looks like, and this is what we're moving towards. And then after getting more input, we put a second prototype out. More input, a third prototype. More input, a fourth prototype. And then we got to a model framework, which looked very similar to what you saw just then. We had 1.0. There were some suggestions from the Cool Council, from the, I think we even had some input from in one of our student advisory councils about the accountability system. What does it look like? We've also had it from the district assessment coordinators across the state, from superintendents, LSAC, Local Superintendents Advisory Council, the Kentucky Board of Education. So we made revisions to where we are now as in 3.1, if you will, or maybe 4.0. We haven't named it yet. But essentially, everything that you've seen here with the 2 changes really is having social studies instead of being assessed locally at every grade level to make it more like the science at grade band levels. So trying to limit the number of tests so that we're not adding tests. So having a grade band level social studies assessment that's designed by the local community or the local school, or they can actually adopt an assessment that we develop if they're not ready to do their own. So we're trying to give options there. And then also, too, just changing the graphic there to say instead of federal accountability, state accountability with federal requirements. So those were the 2 parts of that motion. So what you're seeing and what you heard from me is what we're moving forward with. Our next phase, and you see all the pathway to the moon, if you will, is to start to increase our advocacy with the local, with our state legislators, because we'll have to take this model to them and say, do you approve? And then we do have another cool council meeting coming up pretty soon, and then but we're moving into that advocacy phase. As a matter of fact, I'll be presenting to the interim joint committee on education with the Senate and the House on where we are now, trying to build more and more into getting ready for January to say, what does this look like in law? Next slide, please. So that leaves us with some time for discussion and questions. So before I ask you questions, I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask me questions. So let's start. Yes, ma'am.
So for some context, I'm part of this program. It's called Louisville Youth Philanthropy Council, LYPC. And basically, we grant nonprofits around our Louisville area. Last year, we focused on education and how art can help education. We found the challenge that many of the places that could be used for art or like art performance, they were in really low budgeting, like going through really low budgeting experiences, and they just didn't have enough funding. And I wanted to know if you guys had any budget kind of like expected for this program, because I do agree that art is a really important part of it, but I do see, especially from last year project that we had, that it is really underappreciated, and many of the like places that we have around where I live in this area, they are being closed because they don't have enough money to continue. I wonder if there's any type of like budget expenses that you guys are expecting for this project.
What we're hoping is, as we move forward, is really focus on the local, what's important with the local group. So I agree, and we're talking about arts and humanities and the experiences that they have, is what does it look like for a local accountability model to emphasize those? Do we have to give a test to emphasize that at the state level, or is there something where that's developed locally and incorporate into their local accountability model? Now, Jefferson County, correct? Yes, with Jefferson County, something that is they're at the forefront of is that journey to success. If you look at their defenses of learning, how that looks, how do they, and that's something I'll have to learn, is how they implement the arts and humanities into the journey to success for each individual student. So a lot of those type of questions that relates to arts, we're requiring that it's there, but how a district does that's up to them.
And how are you guys going to measure? How are you guys going to measure the impact of this program or project?
Great question. One of the things I didn't mention is what we're looking at, of course, with the federal requirement. We're also looking at an outside group to come in and review local accountability models based on a rubric to say, are we making sure that every student has opportunity, every student has access, and then actually elevating those programs that maybe there's a good way of incorporating the arts into local accountability model, or maybe there's a good collaboration model with their district. So actually coming up with a network to say, okay, these are the districts. If you're looking at this type of whether it be collaboration, whether it be with the arts, whether it be defenses of learning, having these are the model districts that have these type of processes in place. But also walking out to say, these are the areas where you want to put more emphasis as we move forward. And is it based on the input that you're getting from your local community? So there is a third-party group that will be coming in, and we'll have to bid that out to see who that group is, based on a rubric to say, first of all, are we making sure that every student has these type of opportunities? Or what are the model frameworks that's going on within the district, the model processes, and making sure we elevate that so others can see a part of that collaboration, but also, too, walking out with suggestions. But before you get to that third party in every 3 years, but also building it out so districts are working together. So what districts can we link together to say, okay, how do we develop this local accountability model in a way that it reflects what our community values? So each step of the way having support, not only from KDE, but also peer districts, but also to co-ops to make sure that things are being lifted up. And then also to making sure we have the input back from students. Are we meeting the needs of that local community? When I say we, I'm talking about local districts.
And how are you guys going to see the input from the students? Are the students going to be making some type of like passion project at the end of the school year to tell or talk about their experience with this new work or this new project? how are you guys going to hear back from
Well,
students?
what we're promoting is there has to be vibrant learning in every part of local accountability. So when we talk about vibrant learning, there could be, if a local district decides that passion projects, capstone projects, or whether it be defenses of learning, whether it be project-based learning, how they implement that, we're leaving up to a lot of flexibility for the district. So vibrant learning is required. How that is implemented at the local district, we're leaving that up and trusting our districts to do that with some guidance and with some help from us. Great question. Yes.
Thank you.
I saw one portion where you said that employability is a big factor that is concerning the community for future workers and current students. Are local businesses intended to be included in this accountability system? Is there any community partnership involved, or is it just within the school and maybe colleges?
Local businesses have to play an integral part of this, and because you can't get a true reflection of what your community's desires, wants are for students without those type of interviews and that type of work. As a matter of fact, if you look at the profile of a learner process, every district that has a profile of a learner should have included local businesses, parents, students, teachers, administrators, faith-based organizations, and others as a part of their community to have that input. So a part of the process would be to include business leaders to have a part of this local accountability model. Yes.
Okay, so considering the current state of the federal Department of Education, how are we going to ensure that each district is receiving the funds that they need to implement their local accountability systems? Because I've seen what happens whenever districts are underfunded. They have a lot of great ideas, but when they don't have the money to implement those ideas, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's irrelevant because you can't implement it.
Mhm.
So how is KDE going to step in and make sure that these great ideas that they're having are actually implemented and can actually benefit the students?
I think that's part of the network process. There's a lot of layers to that answer. First of all, you may have a district, and I graduated from a district that may be a little more have a higher poverty rate than what you see with others. But how do we connect them with others that are still making these vibrant learning experiences possible? You have local businesses everywhere that are willing to help, and even districts that are side by side. For example, we have one very small district in central eastern Kentucky that is partnering with a larger district to make sure students have the opportunity to work at a local hospital, to do their internships, or to do job shadowing. So it may not be it may not be that it's going to happen within the boundaries of that county, but how do we get partners and community members to build that network to make these opportunities available? Also, too, a lot of this implementation deals with, if we're looking at every accountability model or every assessment model, if you will, requires state funding. We're already getting X amount of dollars for state assessment. So how do we repurpose that money, but also pull in more allocations from the state budget? When I say the state budget, what we're allocated from our legislators in Frankfurt. But also, too, how do you repurpose the federal funding that you get to, instead of there may be this program that could be repurposed into others. You know, we have X budget to work with. So our goal is to help each district that has Y budget to work with to do it more effectively. And how do we do that is build those networks with each other. There will be an additional budget request from the state government on this accountability model, but how to implement it is going to rely a lot on how do we network with other districts.
And just a little follow-up on that. I am very concerned about the, again, what's happening on the federal level.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we make sure that those things don't kind of like seep into our districts? For example, the removal of like DEI and all of those things. How can we make sure that the programs that were implemented are actually supported, and not just like removing things like that would support diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools?
Mm-hmm.
Because on the federal level, they are being removed.
Mm-hmm.
How can we prevent that happening on the state level? Because that's unacceptable. I mean, all of our students who are like affected by these things, they're also students. I mean, they're affected, but it doesn't seem like anybody's really speaking out for what's happening to these students who are either benefited or harmed by the programs being or not being there.
Mhm.
So how can we prevent our our federal level regulations from harming our students in the state, district, and local levels?
From the very beginning, every district has to sign off an assurance that relates back to Title VI, which is no discrimination based on race, color, origin. But I think as we move forward, it's a very tricky water to navigate. I think the best thing that districts can move forward with is what is the student's need and how do we address it? As far as abiding by federal law, yes, we have to abide by federal law. But I think if we go back to the question of what is the individual student's need and how do we address it, I don't think we can go wrong. So that would be my goal as a superintendent. Regardless of what's happened, for example, let's go with socioeconomic background. If you have a student that doesn't have access based on their socioeconomic background, and they don't have access based on other factors, how do we make sure that they do have access? How do we make sure they do have opportunity? So I think as you move forward, the question is, look at the individual student and how do we address their needs? I don't think that we can ever say that would be illegal. So that would be how I would try to navigate that as a superintendent.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
There's a good chance we've discussed this before, but with such a prevalence on vibrant learning experiences and community involvement when it comes to the local accountability, how do you go about fostering and encouraging development in, say, a school or district that's necessarily falling behind, at least, or could use some extra help with that? And you already answered with network with other districts, so
Yes.
I'm going to challenge you to find a different answer to that question.
Thank you, Patrick. And again, congratulations on the ACT score. I'm sorry, Mr. Graham. I always say that every time, just to get at him. But with that being said, it's Preston, I know, but I always call him Patrick. The very first time I met him, I said, "Hey, Patrick," it was wrong. So I've had to correct that ever since.
I forgive you, don't worry.
I appreciate that, Preston. Now, with that being said, going back to how to address that, if districts are falling behind, the primary is networks. That's the primary. But how are you defining it? Are we looking at falling behind as it relates to federal requirements? If that's the case, then we do have funds here at the state level to say, how do we intervene to help you do the interventions that are necessary to increase student results as far as math and reading? How do we make sure that we move forward with bringing up all those students to have those opportunities? So there are interventions that we do through our OCIS, the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support, that we can actually intervene with the district and to give them those supports that they need. Now, if you're looking at from the local accountability piece, how does a district measure growth in that area? So I think that when you look at that, it first depends on how did the district say this is how our students are growing. And then you have to look at the individual learning plan of how do you get to the student to the point where they need to be. So that being said, we can network with co-ops, maybe not with other districts, so going past just districts. How do you make sure that you have professional development at your education co-ops that can help the districts regionally? Because we have 8 different co-ops we talked about earlier that provide professional development for districts. And they can really cater into what exactly those district needs are. So it could be more about providing professional development. It could be beyond networking with districts. It could also be networking with KDE and other departments as we move forward. So again, I think it really depends on, if you look from the federal piece, of course, KDE is ready. We have those funds to step in and help districts when it comes to math, reading, graduation rates, transition readiness, ELL populations. We have those funds available to step in and provide the training for those turnaround type processes. But on the other hand, if you're looking at from the local accountability model, how do you connect them with your co-ops that can provide professional development for your teachers, for your administrators, or even superintendents for that matter?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
So this isn't really a question as much of just a statement, but you mentioned that we were like revamping the way we're going to do science testing. And I think that's a really important measure that we need to be taking to accurately assess like science ability and like science performance statewide. Because I know compared to like the other test scores in other areas, science, the pass rate was much lower for the past few years. And I don't really think that's a problem necessarily with our science education as much as the science assessment's validity itself. I noticed that like a lot of the questions, some of them literally just didn't have right answers, or there were questions where, like a physics question, it would give us a setup, but then based on the parameters, like the setup or the event it was describing physically isn't possible. Or there were questions where it was honestly just guesswork more than actual science. So I think that revamping how we're doing that test is really important. And I checked these questions like with my peers and with teachers to make sure that I'm not just crazy, like there weren't right answers to some of the questions, or some of the questions simply weren't possible. And I'm in like the Math and Science Technology Center at Dunbar, and I'm pretty sure only around 10% of all the people in math, science, technology ended up getting a distinguished on the science test. And I feel like if in theory we're having the best science education throughout the state and only 10% of us are getting a distinguished on the science test, that's not an issue with our science education rather than the test itself. So I think this is a really important measure that we're taking.
And I think I agree with you, to pull out the portion of the science, it gives us a sandlot, if you will, to work and really focus on science. And, you know, personally, if talking about the science assessment, I felt like it was almost as much of a reading endurance test too.
Yeah.
It was very long passages. And then, you know, you have to build that type of endurance in order to get to that point to be able to answer, you know, X number of questions on maybe 2 pages of a it's almost like the science reasoning on steroids. That's the way I viewed it. And again, as we move forward, what we're trying to do is to change that science assessment so that we really want to focus more on science. But also, too, it makes perfect sense that if you're really going to assess science, what does that really look like? It really lends itself to be more performance-based. Now, we still have the federal requirement to give a science assessment that is standardized, and then we also have the requirement to report it. But who's to say that a district can't start developing their own performance-based assessments based on competencies that assesses a science content, and that could be more vibrant, more meaningful to students, but also gives that opportunity for a performance, if you will. So pulling that out gives us more opportunity. It also gives us a focus on the science assessment, but also, too, gives us other opportunities as we move forward. So thank you for that comment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if there's any like information on the kind of landscape about this, like nationwide. Is Kentucky really at the forefront of this, or are there other states that have developed similar programming, and then like how has it worked there? Like, can we look at how it's worked in other places to kind of get feedback before like implementation starts?
People are looking to Kentucky for this. We are at the forefront when it comes to local accountability and what that looks like. As a matter of fact, we've been invited to be a part of a Reimagining the High School Experience group that has 6 states that are involved. As a matter of fact, at the end of this month, I'm headed to Indianapolis to talk about what we're doing and what that looks like as we move forward. So to answer your question, Kentucky's at the forefront, and a lot of people are looking to us as this work moves forward. I don't think that you'll find another model that's similar to this. Now, can I ask a question? Certainly. All right, great. Thank you. Now, first question, as I alluded to before, how do you feel about districts having the ability to choose their own accountability measures? What's your thoughts on that? Yes.
I mean, I feel like my immediate thought is that it's a really strong idea. The presentation makes it very clear that we have a big opportunity to allow people at the school level and the state level and to kind of mesh together and find what works best for the students. I think the real question all comes down to implementation. As an idea, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
I agree a lot with Peter. I feel, however, a bit nervous about the idea because I feel that when there is a potential for the district to interpret it a certain way that in turn would just leave everything the same, and it, as I said, it just makes me feel a little bit wary of maybe a bit too much independence with the district, and they just won't do what's best for the students in the end.
I think to add to that, I think there's a level of trust here that we're giving for our districts to say, how do we move forward to give that better opportunity for students? I will say that districts that are getting into this work, and I'll use a quote from Bullitt County. Superintendent Bacon, who they have the profile of a learner, but they're moving into a local accountability model, says that this has been a game changer for his district. The work with local community leaders, the work with parents, with teachers, has really built a momentum and actually built trust within their district. I'll use another one in Rockcastle County, Carrie Ballinger, who this is their first year into the local accountability work. She said even if this wasn't a part of the next step, they wouldn't go back because they have so much investment, so many of their business leaders, their parents, their community leaders that are invested into their schools now and are a part of that decision making as they move forward. She said even if this didn't pass, there's no way that we would move back. We would still have this added on to whatever the accountability system would look like. So once we get districts involved, the momentum is so positive that it just seems to make a difference in what districts look like. So there is a level of trust, but there's also that level of we also need to come back and make sure that the student experience is being elevated for students as we move forward. So good point. Yes, ma'am.
I think kind of piggybacking on the idea of like weariness with solely local accountability, there has to be that regional accountability as well. I really like the fact that you talked about the collaboration between districts that are similar in certain ways. And I really connected that to looking at our council. Like we all have at least one thing in common at the fact that we're passionate about leadership and advocacy. But all of us come from very different backgrounds. We don't know each other's experiences, and we all come from different geographical locations. But we're still able to come to conclusions. We're able to have positive discussions. And like Peter mentioned earlier, we're all able to benefit from each other's ideas. So I think that regional accountability will definitely aid in that local accountability implementation.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, ma'am.
I will say, going off the weariness too, I feel like schools would be very eager and optimistic about this opportunity to have this ability to kind of customize their students' learning experiences. However, the double-edged sword of that is you're also putting a lot of that back on the communities surrounding those districts. I will say I come from an area that does not have a lot of communal support and backing a lot of the students in their career endeavors and seeing how they push their education into the community. So I think if anything, that would be one thing that would probably be pushback. If you don't have communities and districts that are on the same page about what they expect from their students, that could probably present some adversity, but the optimism in that is also expecting that you have other districts that probably do have a little bit more support from their community that can also bring that support from other communities back to the forefront of their minds and kind of alter a little bit of the mindset of business leaders.
I think that gives the onus, if you will, or the responsibility of districts to say, not only we're going to open doors, we're going to build bridges. We're going to pave roads. And if you don't come, we're going to come to you. I'll use Shelby County as example. They do defenses of learning at the outlet mall at times. In the past, they've done some of their defenses of learning not at a school. They knew that maybe parents wouldn't come to their school, so at the outlet mall that they have there in Simpsonville, I think it is, they did some defenses of learning there. So they went to the community to say this is what a defensive learning looks like to get people involved. They started inviting local businesses to have them a part of these defenses of learning. So I agree, it's going to for some districts it's going to be more of an uphill battle. We may have to level some mountains and climb mountains, but I think by opening the door, building those bridges, and moving forward, I think it gives us a good opportunity. Yes, ma'am.
Kind of go off of what everybody's been saying. I'm really enjoying like this the cross-district collaboration that you mentioned. But I'm also with you all on the weariness. I think some districts are not as diligent as others and don't really have the same goals when it comes to benefiting like the students. So I think that it's really important to make sure that there is kind of still some state oversight. And an idea would be that if there's a certain district who's kind of pushing back against the local accountability and certain goals that we think that maybe like all of us should have, we should partner them, like facilitate the partnering with a district who is doing that stuff. And kind of like make sure that they can bounce ideas maybe off of each other, and that district that is doing the stuff can influence the one that's not, in a way. I think that would be a great way for the state to stay involved and make sure that we are being as diligent as we can be.
And I think it all goes back to partnering the right people with each other. And again, one thing I'll say is I was a superintendent for 10 years. And the very first year, I didn't see as much collaboration among superintendents. And maybe that was my fault. Maybe that was just my being a new superintendent. But a lot of times it was more about who could win the basketball game or the football game on Friday night, or maybe it was more about who could keep their students and not have them transfer somewhere else, or who could win at the academic team competition at the end and what students we could get. But as time passed, maybe I got to be a better superintendent, maybe I got to be a better person, but I saw more and more superintendents that were willing to work with each other. And when not only superintendents, as the leaders, also connecting districts. No one told Woodford County that they had to reach out to someone else. As a matter of fact, Woodford County, if you look at test scores, is one of our high flyers, if you look at test scores, but they wanted something more for their students. So when you start looking at, when you have that district to take that initiative to say, you know, this district, Clark County has some similarity with us. How can we work together? Let's go visit their district. So I think it is key that that we connect districts with each other that may be a little more, have more obstacles, maybe even have their own obstacles that they create themselves, to give them what's possible. Because sometimes I think that we're all in that situation where we need to teach others to dream. Sometimes students don't know what they're capable of unless a teacher steps in, or a parent, or a role model steps in and say, this is what is possible. By the same token, there are districts the same way. Maybe they don't know what's possible until they see examples of it next door. So I think your point, to your point, it is key to connect districts that have that enthusiasm, that positive change. This is how it's made a difference in our students. This is how it's made a difference in our culture. This is how it's made such a positive moving forward with those districts that may be hesitant to say, how can we work together to move forward? And I think I really trust and believe that our districts are on board with increasing or bettering the student experience, if you will. So in the interest of time, let me ask one more question. Is there something unique about your district that should be in your local accountability model? So is there something that is unique to your district that you think should be in a part of your local accountability, or maybe it already is, but what should be a part of your district's local accountability model? Yes.
I'm not certain if this is the same or not for other districts. I've heard that it's not, but at my school, we have the SDL showcase, where it's the self-directed learning showcase, where each grade band goes and they pick a passion project they've done from the year that they feel best represents everything they've done through their education, and they present it to the community, they present it to their fellow students and their parents, and everyone from the local community gathers in the school and sees how they've learned. And I think that's just a really great way to showcase what they're passionate about.
And those are typically built on profiles of a learner or profiles of a graduate. And what is that defensive learning? What is that passion project? What does it look like? And how do you make that a part of the local accountability model? Is every student, first of all, it may start for some districts, it may just be as simple as what percentage of our students are participating in this type of project? And then as time passes, it could be what's the value? What is the value added to a student? Or it could be what's the level of proficiency for the student? So it may start for some districts, we just need to start and have that type of opportunity. And are all of our students, what percentage of our students are participating in these type of activities? Then it may be more about, as they move forward, about, what does that look like as far as creativity and other rubrics that may be involved. But I agree. I think that's a great thing. And there's a lot of districts that are doing things like that to be a part of their local accountability model. Thank you for sharing that. Yes.
We do like a month-long series of showcases. We start out the month with our 8th grade showcase, which introduces our incoming high schoolers to all the pathways that they have available to them going into high school. And then after that, we do a tour showcase. So that will be hosted in our schools for students coming directly from feeder schools, specifically to our schools, because some of our pathways are interchangeable through the district. So we'll meet with them and introduce them to those pathways on that personal level. And then we have a open house type of night where we introduce parents to showcases and basically talk them through all the options that this would present for their student. So that kind of like rotating circle of who we're introducing our pathways to see all those possible outcomes.
And again, the creativity of not only what's the success of that, what percentage of our students get into a pathway, what percentage of our students successfully complete that pathway, what percentage of our students are presenting at that time. So how a district looks at that accountability, I think that's a great opportunity, if they don't already, to include that in their local accountability. Great point. But you can also see that that's more than a test score. That's so much more than a test score. And just like the projects we were talking about before, that's so much more than just a test score. Others? Yes.
If there is something that I wish that every school had was something called the Ivy Plus Academy. His name is Mr. Baker. He created this program a couple of years ago. And essentially, it's kind of like a program where students who are part of get to know about other programs of our community. So he will basically ask you what you're passionate about. In my case, let's say medicine. And he would be like, okay, there's some shadowing opportunities in this area. There's some programs in this area. But then overall, to all of the students, he will always offer some type of program like philanthropy, youth philanthropy, some type of like education. Like he would just give you a lot of resources. And for me, my case was a little different because I had just got into the country. I didn't know English, and I got into my first class, and they told me about this program. And when I applied, I didn't really know what to expect. But he basically guided me through the entire process of how to get involved into my community. And he's just such a great tool and like such a great person. And I feel like we all should have the opportunity of having somebody like him at our school who can offer us so much and can help us explore our passions. So that would be the main thing that I wish that we all had. And then I will also have something that is called a club day out of school. And every last Friday of the month, we have a day where all students who are part of school activities can meet. And this is really great for students who cannot have transportation for school, so they can be involved into more activities. For example, I'm part of 3 programs at my school. So in club day, my first period I go to this club, in second period I go to this club, third period I go to the next club. So that has really helped. And we also do showcases for these clubs, for club day. So that have helped a lot of people. Yeah.
So, and again, if you look at some districts that talk about how are you involved in co-curricular, extracurricular activities, that gives students the opportunity to do that. Honestly, when I was in middle school, we did this for maybe one semester. I was part of a chess club. I loved that. But it gave me the opportunity to go to school, and don't get me wrong, math, science, reading, all that's important. But also, too, I had other things to look forward to. Then I also had the academic team. Yes, I go back to academic team. We played probably 400 quick recall matches at least in my 4 years. Yes, 400. We went to Houston. We went all over. They flew us to Rice University. We played in a national tournament. Matter of fact, I share this story a lot of times. The very first time that I was on a plane was with my high school academic team. I think I've shared that with this group. So those opportunities with my academic team were very special. But that probably molded me more into the person I am today. While the coursework is important, this did get me into the path where I am to be a teacher, to be an educator, and move forward. So great points. Anything else that's happened at your districts that you think should be part of a local accountability model? Yes.
For me in my district, I think we're really good about arts education, and I've know that that's not a big thing across Kentucky, and it's probably due to our proximity to the Art Center of the Bluegrass. But we also do something called Intersession for a week before spring break, which is students get to come in and there's different classes, mostly celebrating cultural identities, new forms of learning and that kind of thing. And my school does not have the best test scores, so I feel like this accountability model would allow us to like understand and celebrate our students more holistically because we're not a bad school at all. Like there's a lot of things that like arts, cultural that like we're very good about, but like test scores don't really show that. And with like state oversight, of course, standards are important. So I think this like is pretty foolproof in that concern.
You know, and the thing I love what you're saying there is your district's so much more than a test score. You're so much more than a test score. You know, okay, I understand there may be some help where we need to help students with math and reading. That's great. We need to do that. But on the other hand, too, what other opportunities are you having within your schools that say, you know, we're so much more than that accountability score that happens at the end? Or we're so much more than a yellow school. We're so much more than an orange school. Or we're so much more than a blue school, as a matter of fact. Regardless, there's more than just a color. You know, we shouldn't say that a school is just a color to me. But giving kids those opportunities to celebrate, whether it be drama, whether it be music, whether it be art, whether it be to have those type of opportunities, I think would be very important to include in a local accountability model. Great point. We have time for one more? Yes, sir.
Kind of going back to like the celebrating part, I feel like within our district, like our sports teams are like super good in ours, and they hardly get talked about like ever. So I feel like if we're gonna like include the celebration within the arts, we could do like the sports or like the academic teams as well, because some of those kids compete at like really high levels in and outside of school. So I feel like putting the recognition of those schools and kids would be like super influential in kind of improving morale, I guess.
I think to your point, celebrating hard work.
Yeah.
And the results of that hard work. Now, how we define that or what that looks like for each individual is different. I think that's why the local accountability model is so important. You know, there may be certain things in a community that we don't think about. For example, maybe one community really wants students to have some type of job shadowing or internship or apprenticeship opportunity. So how do we make sure that happens for the students? Or it may be we want to make sure that students achieve at a district, region, state level in academics, athletics, co-curricular, extracurricular activities, JROTC. You know, we have programs that compete nationally in JROTC across the Commonwealth. So there's a lot of celebrations that we could have, and how do we mold that into local accountability to give a true picture of our success, but also areas where we can grow. And I'll close with this. If a district gives us a local accountability model where they score 100s across the board, it's not worth the paper it's written on. It's not worth the website that it's published to, because it's about growth. You need to identify areas where we can grow to better the student experience, and then have data, have support that says this is how we're improving the student experience. To me, that's the dream, is to make sure that we get to the point where every student has a relevant, meaningful, useful experience each and every day, and that your senior year isn't just let's fill out a couple of requirements to make sure we get these 2 classes to get our graduation requirement. It's more about maybe AP courses, maybe dual credit, maybe it's more about job shadowing, maybe it's more about internships, maybe it's more about apprenticeships. So that, again, each and every part of your school day is important to you and also makes an impact of where you're going next. Great discussion, great questions. Thank you all so much for bringing those up. And then we are actually past time where we were, about 50 minutes. But again, if you have any other questions, you're welcome to text me or send me an email, robbie.fletcher@education.ky.gov. I'll do my best to answer those questions as we move forward. Karen, anything you'd like to add before we close out? All right. And our next slide. Ready to adjourn, sir?
Yes, I want to take a brief moment to thank both Commissioner Fletcher and all the staff that supports the Student Advisory Council. Over the last several years, I've had the pleasure of serving on this council from a member as a sophomore all the way to the chair as a senior. And this council has provided me many opportunities, many unique experiences to meet people, to be pulled into new opportunities, but also to learn about the behind the scenes of the last 13 years of education that I've experienced in Kentucky. Commissioner Fletcher has been one of the best people I've had the pleasure of working with in high school and in extracurriculars in general, and all the staff that we've had throughout our time, whether credited or not. have been really important to me, and I hope have served all of you to the best of their ability. So thank you to all the staff and to all of you for serving on this council. Thank you. I give a motion to adjourn. Can't forget that.
So moved.
Preston, and a second.
I can second.
Second from Daniel Radley. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.